In regards to Pesach Sheni that's discussed in this week's Parsha, we find in the Gemara 3 opinions, 3 explanations of how Pesach Sheni works. The first is that it's a regel b'fnei atzmo, it's considered a Yom Tov for itself, an obligation for itself, not dependent on Pesach Rishon. Which means that even if someone was not obligated in Pesach Rishon, for example, he just turned bar mitzvah between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, or just became a geir between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, he's going to have to bring the carbon Pesach Sheni because it has nothing to do with whether he was obligated by Pesach Rishon. Another opinion is that it's called Tashlumin Rishon. It's making up for Pesach Rishon. That means if someone was not obligated in Pesach Rishon, there's nothing to make up for it. So he's not going to have to bring Pesach Sheni. If in Pesach Rishon he did not bring the carbon, b'mezid, he's going to be chayiv kares immediately. But we say there is still some way of being able to compensate, of being able to make it up. That's called tashlumin. And if he's going to make it up, the chayiv kares will be cancelled. But what happens if he doesn't make it up? Even if it was a shoygig by mistake that he didn't make it up, he still has the chayiv kares from before. He was just being given a chance to make it up. He was given a chance to be able to compensate, and he didn't. So he's still chayiv kares. Then there's another way of looking at Pesach Sheni, and that is that it's called takanto derishon. It's a way of completely fixing up what he missed out on Pesach Rishon, and it's in a way that the Torah is lechatchila giving you the chance from the beginning to be able to make Pesach Sheni, which would mean, number one, of course, again, that if he wasn't obligated in Pesach Rishon, there's no point in bringing Pesach Sheni. But in this case, it's not only a compensation, the Torah is allowing you to bring the Pesach in another time, and therefore, as long as that time didn't pass, the chiyuv of kares didn't happen yet. So if the person missed out on Pesach Rishon, he's given a chance to do Pesach Sheni, and up until that time, he's not chayiv kares yet. So if that time comes and there's a shoygeg, he will be potter. Now the Rambam counts Pesach Sheni as a mitzvah for itself. He explains that the halacha is according to the opinion that Pesach Sheni is a regel, is a Yom Tov for itself. The question, however, is, even if Pesach Sheni is considered a Yom Tov for itself, the obligation is still only going to be if the person did not bring Pesach Rishon. You don't bring Pesach Sheni if you did bring Pesach Rishon. So seemingly, it's still the same mitzvah, bringing the carbon Pesach. Why should it be counted as a mitzvah for itself? So we must say that even though these two Pesachs are connected to each other, and you don't bring both, it's one or the other, nevertheless, there's a fundamental difference in the very essence of how we define these mitzvahs, and that's why they are counted separately. To understand this, says the Rebbe, we're going to look at some differences between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. One difference is that in Pesach Rishon, Bal Yiro, Bal Yimotza, you're not allowed to have chametz. Pesach Sheni, you can have chametz and matzah in your house. A second difference, Pesach Rishon is 7 days, Pesach Sheni is 1 day. These differences come because of the fundamental difference between what these 2 days represent. To explain, Pesach Rishon is the way the Torah had set up the mitzvah right from the outset, the order and the time of when this Pesach needs to be brought. Pesach Sheni is for someone that didn't bring it in its right time. As the famous Pisgum of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Pesach Sheni is the idea, as an ishtaken for fallen, it's never too late, you can make up. This is similar to the concept, the difference between avodas hatzadikim and avodas habalei tshuva. A tzaddik is doing things the way it was meant to be right from the beginning. A bal tshuva is fixing up. Says the Rebbe, this explains why Hashem doesn't say lechatchila about the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni. It's only after the Yidden come and ask. Because the whole idea of tshuva is really a oidus that's coming from the person, someone that's not feeling those mitzvahs or those revelations from above. He's coming and begging to have another chance. According to this, we can also understand another point. By other Yomim Tovim, there's a concept that if a person didn't bring the necessary karbanos the first day, there are 7 days to bring the carbon. Here we don't say the Pesach Sheni is done right away during the time of Pesach in the next 7 days. It's done a whole month later. Why is that? Because Pesach Sheni, representing the avodah of Balei Tshuva, is not only about just fixing up or compensating a little bit for what we missed out. The idea of Pesach Sheni is that this is a whole other level, a kind of avodah, a completely different level of avodah in avodas Hashem. This is the avodah of tshuva, and that's what we mean when we say regel b'fnei atzmoi. It's a totally different kind of Yom Tov. One is tzadikim, one is balei tshuva. Now, the truth of the matter is we know that there's a certain advantage, the avoid of a Baal Tshuva over a tzaddik, that he could take even the things that were in sholish klippus atmeis, things that were completely negative, and transform them now into merits, into mitzvahs when he does a proper tshuva. Whereas a tzaddik is only dealing with things that are in the realm of holiness, or at least things that are permissible, because it's specifically the Baal Tshuva that reaches to a level that's we call kachashecha ka'ira. It's higher than ishtalshlus, where dark and light are exactly the same, and he can transform even the darkness. Says the Rebbe, this will also explain why there is even a svara to say that maybe if a person didn't bring the Pesach Rishon, it is over. It is lost. Why is that? Because from the perspective of Torah, there is a certain way of acting. There's a certain seder of how things have to be, and that's the seder of ishtalshlus, the normal order of things, is that you need to act in this way, and you can't make up. You can't transform the complete negative into positive. And Davka mitzad Hashem, that's higher than ishtalshlus, comes along and says, you know what? It's never over, it's never too late, and you could make it up. Says the Rebbe, now we're going to start understanding the differences between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Pesach Rishon, we said there's no chametz, bal yiro, bal yumotzei. It represents the idea we need to push away the bad completely. Tzaddikim only deal with positive things, no negativity at all. Pesach Sheni, we have the chametz as well. We're going to elevate even the negativity. Pesach Rishon is 7 days. 7 is the concept of Seder Ishtalshlus, the 7 midos, 7 days, etc. Pesach Sheni is 1 day, it's higher than Ischalkos. This is higher than division. It's similar to the idea that we say that tshuva comes in one moment. Or as the famous story Rabbi Elazar ben Nurdaya, a great Baal Tshuva that Rebbe says about him, that many people have to work for years and years for their Olam Haba. Here you have a person that in one moment got all of his Olam Haba. That's the idea of Yom Echad, like Pesach Sheni, one Nakuda, which is higher than division. The Rebbe says this is really also the difference between Chodesh Nisan and Iyar. Pesach Rishon is in Chodesh Nisan. Nisan generally is associated with the avodah of tzaddikim, whereas Chodesh Iyar, the month we're involved in Sfiras HaOmer, it's about elevating that which is low, transforming it. This is more like the idea of tshuva and the concept of Pesach Sheni. Says the Rebbe, based on this idea that Pesach Sheni is the concept of tshuva, we can also now explain the 3 opinions that we said before regarding Pesach Sheni. Because in tshuva, generally, there are 3 ways. One aspect we said about Pesach Sheni, that it's a takana, which means that the Torah lechatchila gave the room to make Pesach Sheni. In tshuva, that would mean that when a person does an aveda right from the outset, yes, Hashem is giving us the opportunity to be able to fix it up, and that applies to most averos. Torah is giving the opportunity to do tshuva. Then we have something called the tashlumin of Pesach Sheni, which means that no, there is no room originally to have a Pesach Sheni. But practically, if the person didn't do the Pesach Rishon, he is still being allowed to do the Pesach Sheni. As we said before, it's only if he's going to make sure to do it, because otherwise there isn't really any room for the Pesach Sheni. This would be more like the tshuva for an Aveda, where a person said, Echtav Ashav, I'm going to do the Aveda and I'm going to do tshuva. Which according to the normal order, we actually say there's no room for tshuva. But yes, if the person pushed himself, strengthened himself, and he did tshuva, his tshuva will be accepted. Then there's the concept in Pesach Sheni where we say regel b'fnei atzma is like a complete yomta for itself. This is a tshuva that goes beyond and removed from the negativity completely. This is like the idea that we say that even a tzaddik needs to do tshuva, going from level to level and higher. Because tshuva is not necessarily only on aveiros, but it's a derech in avodas Hashem. It's a regel b'fnei atzma. It's a concept for itself, regardless if I did aveiros or not. Now, of course, Pesach Sheni generally is for the concept of tshuva for Averis, but generally speaking, we're saying it includes all the kinds of tshuva, even the tshuva of tzaddikim. The Rebbe says, in fact, based on this idea, that right from the outset, according to the concept that Pesach Sheni is a takana, which means right from the outset there's room for the tshuva. It will also explain why we say that a Rasha should learn Torah even though he's adding chayis to Klippa, and we say, because when he's going to do tshuva, he's going to get the Torah out of the Klippa. What does that mean? That's the halacha. What does that mean? In other words, what we're saying, right when he's doing the Aveda, we're allowing him to do tshuva because we're relying lechatchila. Yes, he is going to do tshuva. There is room for tshuva right away. Says the Rebbe, just like we say that Pesach Sheni, which is a tshuva Yom Tov, includes all types of tshuva, even that of tzaddikim, so to Pesach Rishon, even though it's a tzaddik Yom Tov, but it includes all the avodas of a tzaddikim, even that idea that a tzaddik also sometimes does tshuva. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why the Rambam counts Pesach Sheni as a mitzvah for itself, even though we say that someone that brings Pesach Rishon doesn't bring Pesach Sheni. Because the Rebbe explains, in other words, yes, these are 2 separate mitzvahs, meaning they're 2 separate avodas. One is tzaddikim, one is bali tshuva. But if somewhere brought the Pesach Rishon, that means he did the avoid of tzaddikim, he doesn't need to bring Pesach Sheni right now, because we said Pesach Rishon also includes the tshuva of tzaddikim. Nevertheless, the ultimate idea of tshuva is going to be still in the tshuva on an Aveira, like the other two aspects of Pesach Sheni, where it's either tashlumin or a takana. Number one, because specifically the Baal Tshuva is the one that has such a tremendous thirst because it was such a dark place, such a dry place. He is the one that's going to have the much greater love to Hashem and greater avodah more than tzaddikim. Number two, he is the one that reaches higher than Ishtalshlus, which as a result of that, he could transform even this doinis into Zachias. And this goes back to what we said before, that Pesach Rishon is 7 days. Even though Pesach Rishon, we said, includes the concept of tshuva of tzaddikim, but still, if it's the tshuva of a tzaddik, it's still going to have some sort of limitations. Only Pesach, that's why it's 7, the level of Ishtalshlus and Ischalkos. Only Pesach Sheni is the one that reaches higher than Ischalkos, similar to what we said before, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordaya, that Kanoi Lamoy B'Shoah Achas.